taxing and spending clause. While this clause might seem to be reasonably straightforward, we have had controversy from the earliest days of the Republic as to its meaning. And we sort of accepted one solution to that, but now we've got the Tea Party movement reopening the question, which is fine with me. Thomas Jefferson and James Madison beginning a tradition of interpretation that carries forth to this day with many people, including Beck and Tea Party enthusiasts, maintain that this clause essentially has no meaning. For Jefferson and Madison, all this clause means is that Congress has the power to collect taxes. Reference to the general welfare means nothing. The spending purposes of those taxes will be found in the next 16 clauses. The general welfare mentioned in this clause is to be defined by what follows in Article 1, Section 8. Alexander Hamilton, however, had a quite different view, and this has profound implications for the way in which our government operates. Hamilton's interpretation of this clause is that Congress has the power to lay and collect taxes for the purpose of providing things for the general welfare. No meaning versus being able to provide things for the general welfare. This clause, in Hamilton's view, was a power in addition to the clauses that follow, and was not defined by those clauses. You'll see the first great the first great or crummy for that matter, it was great, but the first legal commentary on the Constitution ever written was by Joseph Story, who served on the Supreme Court with John Marshall for about 3 decades, and was one of the great legal minds of the first half of the 19th century in America. Although you wouldn't think there'd be much to have a commentary on, the book is 3 volumes, and each of the volumes is about 500 pages long. And when he discusses the general welfare clause, it's essentially in there. It's essentially Hamilton's interpretation. This clause, in Hamilton's view, was a power in addition to clauses that follow, and was not defined by those clauses. We can better understand this debate by looking at an actual policy issue. In 1960, Senator Barry Goldwater of Arizona, who would be the Republican presidential candidate in 1964, wrote a best-selling book, The Conscience of a Conservative, a book that many people see as the beginning of the modern conservative movement in this country. In this book, Goldwater argued that federal aid to education, which was really just sort of getting started in the late 1950s, was unconstitutional. Goldwater argued that the national government has no constitutional authority to legislate in the area of education. The word education is not found in Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, or anywhere else in the Constitution for that matter. No matter how well-intended, federal aid to education is a violation of the Constitution. But of course, we do have federal aid to education. And obviously, those members of Congress who have voted for it over the decades see it as perfectly constitutional. What then is the rationale for the constitutionality of federal aid to education? The answer is to be found in Hamilton's interpretation of the General Welfare Clause. Federal aid to education is a thing that Congress is providing for the general welfare. I trust it is obvious that much is at stake in this debate. The understanding that Jefferson and Madison have of the General Welfare Clause is dramatically different from the view held by Hamilton and Washington. That's what I said earlier, good and great men were on both sides of these questions. What are the powers of the federal government? As we have seen, much of the answer to that question turns on which of the rival interpretations we choose to take of the General Welfare Clause. Hamilton's federal government can do much more than can the federal government of Jefferson and Madison. It should also be reasonably clear that Hamilton's position is the view that has prevailed in constitutional law. That is the only position that can justify much of the wide array of federal government activity that currently takes place and has taken place for a long time. However, we should keep in mind that just because a particular position in constitutional law prevails, it does not necessarily follow that that position is correct. Jefferson argued that Hamilton's understanding of the General Welfare Clause, the understanding that was largely followed by the Washington administration, threatened to transform the limited government of the Constitution into an unlimited government. This, however, is not quite so, as we can see if we go back to the education example. Suppose that Congress proposed a national curriculum that every public school, which are entities of the state and local governments, not the federal government, must implement. Hamilton would join Jefferson and Madison and Goldwater in arguing that such a bill was unconstitutional.